Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and to a brand new video. So today I'm here to wrap up the 31 books that I read in August as part of the 31 books in 31 days challenge. Oh, I'm glad that's over. I can't believe I actually managed to complete this challenge. I had done it once before, but it was by accident. I did it April 2020 and I'll try and link my wrap up if I remember. But that was an accident. It was just because I was reading a lot. I've not expected myself to do that ever again. So to challenge myself to do it this month was silly. However, I managed it. And it was hard because I went on holiday for 7 days and I read one book. So it made the rest of the month like a catch-up rat race. But you can see every detail on my vlogs. There are 4 vlogs up that you can watch the week by week play-by of the most... of one of the hardest challenges I've done. I read a lot of books anyway, so I thought it wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, with it being such a busy month in the summer, and like I don't really love reading in the summer because you're so hot, like you can't relax to read. Definitely think it would have been a better thing to do in the winter. So maybe I'll do it again. I'm joking. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about these 31 books in as much detail as I can fit in without this being the longest video of life itself. I also don't remember a lot of them, I will admit. Like, when you're reading book after book after book, many in the same day, your brain just doesn't quite hold them all in, but I will try my best. I did do a lot of in-depth reviews for these on my Goodreads and my Instagram, so you can go and check those out if you want to. Anyway, moving on. The first book that I read in August was such a good one. Like, I really started off on the right foot here, and that was with One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, I am definitely a Taylor Jenkins Reid girly, and I read 2 of her books this month, so we will get to that. I just think that she is such a talented writer. I think she has the ability to embody characters in a way no other author has. They feel so, not just even 3D, they feel real. I always feel like I'm reading a memoir instead of a fiction story. I cannot get over her talent in writing these characters. This book just hit me in my feels. So it is about this woman who loses her husband the day before their 1-year wedding anniversary in a plane accident. He is riding a helicopter and they're very much into traveling. Like this couple, they're very adventurous. And so it's kind of a normal thing for him to be in a helicopter. And she's at home because it was a work thing, and she loses him, and you know, you see her grieve and it's very sad, and she goes through it, as you can imagine, losing the love of her life. And you're kind of following 2 timelines, this current timeline where she's lost her husband, and then you see flashbacks to when she was a teenager working in the store, and she meets a man at her parents' store. I think his name was Sam. It's been a month, I can't remember. I think his name was Sam. And, you know, they had like a little bit of a fling. They were best friends. He asked her out a couple of times. She said no, and then she was into him. Then he disappeared and went to a university and never really spoke to her again. They rekindle in the current timeline, and she ends up falling in love with him, and they get engaged. And then one day, she gets a phone call from her husband to say he is not dead, and he has just spent years trying to get back to her. So she then has this awful decision between 2 men that she really loves. You know, she's done nothing wrong. She loves both men, and it's a different kind of love, and she needs to go through the stage of accepting or moving on or rekindling a romance between these 2 men. This book had me sobbing. I was truly sobbing. I just want to say now I gave it 5 stars. I think it is the best book Taylor Jenkins Reid has written, and for it to beat Evelyn Hugo says something. But her ability to write regular, mundane characters instead of celebrities is unparalleled, and I think she does such an incredible job. This book, yeah, I was sobbing. Some of the lines in this story just hit me. I think if you have had any experience with love and breakups and just, oh my god, it was just so emotional, and I've been in an emotional state the last few months anyway, so to read this, oh my god, it was so hurtful. And my sister was visiting, and she was standing in the kitchen watching me have a breakdown, and she was like, oh my god, are you okay? I was just gone. I think the character made the right decision at the end, but it didn't make it any less hard to read and any less hurtful to read. No matter how this story plays out, you are going to be in pain. So yeah, I do think this is the best book ever written, and it is now my favourite book that I have read this year so far. So best way to have started this challenge. And if you were going to go out and read any book from this list or any book I've ever recommended, make it this one because it's so good. Then going from one of the best books ever to one of the worst books ever. No, it's not worst book ever, but it is the biggest disappointment. I read Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I do want to say, for full disclosure, I did not finish the book. I got to 70% and I just DNF'd it, but I did count it as read for this challenge because I had got to 70% and it did take me like 3 days. So I did mark it as read, but it's okay because I did actually read 32 books because I read some novellas and I'm not counting. So we'll count it as okay. The thing is, I'm going to reread this book because I have a copy anyway. I read it as an arc, and I'll just say, I expected to love it as someone who'd loved The Love Hypothesis because it is the same book. Ali Hazelwood, great writer of The Love Hypothesis, but I've also read her feminist novellas. We will talk about them in a bit. And this woman cannot write anything but The Love Hypothesis. It is the same story on repeat. And she's going to make as much money as she can out of the same book on repeat, which good for her. Good for you, girlie. Do as you please. However, this book was the same as Love Hypothesis, but without the chemistry, in my opinion. I felt it was over scientific from the beginning and I was a little bit bored. I don't mind a bit of science talk. I think it's great because you're reading a science romance. However, this was too much. I hated the man. I hated her. Honestly, she was one of the most whiny people on planet Earth. I just feel it was boring, bad with connections between the characters, and all around kind of poorly written. You couldn't have paid me to get through that last 30%. I was truly over it, and I think that made me hate it more. So I gave it 1 star. However, I will be rereading it at some point, I think, to see how I feel. Maybe it was just on the back end of one of the best books I'd ever read, and a romance. I think maybe you could have gone into going into this book, it might have felt a bit shallow compared to the book I just read. I don't know 100%, but I am willing to give it another shot. However, I think a lot of people have given it 5 stars, yes, but have they given it 5 stars because they just love the Love Hypothesis? Don't know, because most of the reviews I've seen have said similar things, and a lot of people have been disappointed by this book, so I don't feel on my own. However, I am going to try it again at some point. The next book that I read was The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. This is a wild story. This is absolutely wild. It's following I don't really understand. I'm not really sure what I read, but I think it's following an apartment complex, and you follow the characters who live within this apartment complex, and they're like a collection of short stories. It's like an anthology. But you do find out that they kind of interlink, and you just have to wait to find out how. I did give it 2 stars. However, this is not a bad book. This is for people who are a fan of like Bunny by Mona Awad, of which I was definitely not. But if you are, this is the perfect read for you. It is like everywhere right now. It's like Waterstone's #1 debut pick, and I can understand why. Very interesting, very well written. So my rating is personal opinion because this is definitely a better book than a 2-star rating it deserves. It was so evident to me that the author had done a lot of planning and groundwork to know what was going to happen throughout this book. Like, she was ready with her facts and it was all coming together so well. I really, really liked that. And I loved the discussions on good people versus evil people and how does that come about? What does evil breed evil? What happens? Absolutely loved those discussions. And I was trying so hard to think deeply into the story, and it's nice to make your brain work sometimes for a book. However, I found that I was thinking way too much into it and not getting much out of it. Like, I just found it too weird and I didn't understand it. I'm not one for weird books. I've read one weird book that I've ever liked, and that was Catherine House. And I'm not really sure why I liked it. Just all vibes. Every other weird book that I've ever tried, I've not liked. So, I'm not sure what I expected. But I did give it 2 stars as my personal enjoyment rating. Next, I read The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. And I just want to start by saying, if you're a fan of The Spanish Love Deception, this is a good book for you because that is just the same book. I'm pretty sure The Hating Game was written first, but The Spanish Love Deception is a rewrite of The Hating Game. They are quite literally the same thing. Involves a wedding, involves fake dating, involves workplace romance, hate to love. It is the same book. So that's a good start. However, This book was hard to love. I gave it 3 stars because I enjoyed the romance overall. Like, I think they had good chemistry. I did like them together. However, these start with like their enemies in the workplace, and it was so sad because the things they were doing to each other, the pranks, the evilness, the complaints. At one point you see the HR woman and she looks on the brink of tears and she's like, you guys are my full-time job, like you guys are my only issue. And I just felt so sorry for her and everybody else in the workplace. Their issues were affecting everybody else, and that's just not fair. That's just toxic. So I just couldn't love them. Okay, maybe I should suspend my disbelief for a romance, but I can't. Like, I can't. I also found that there's a scene at the end of the book where Lucy and Josh's dad have like this altercation. Okay? And I'm not going to say anymore because it is the spoiler because it's the end of the book. However, Lucy's there like, I feel so badass. Yeah, everyone's rooting for me. It's cringy and embarrassing, and I literally had awful secondhand embarrassment where I was like, I've got to stop reading. If I wasn't so close to the end, I'd have stopped because it was so embarrassing and cringy. I literally couldn't cope. But minging. You were not girl boss. You were not boss ass bitch. You were embarrassing yourself and me. So, didn't love the book. I didn't hate the book. 3 stars, but a low 3, you know? Won't be reading Sally Thorne's other works. I have unhauled them for that reason. I do not need any more cringe in my life. So yeah, if you struggle with cringy romances, this is not for you because you'll just hate the characters and hate the cringe that they bring you. So next I read The Score by Elle Kennedy. This is the 3rd book in the Off-Campus series. So I read the next 2 books in that series for the final girl support group readathon, the 48-hour one, and I wanted to finish off some series, so I chose this one. This book, I give it a 4. I've given, I think, every book in the series a 4 except for the second one. It's a 4, but it's a low 4, and it's a 4 in terms of it's a fun, easy romance to read. It's between Dean and Ali, and Ali is one of the most amazing characters. She's so sweet, she's so caring, and she's so self-aware. Like, the kind of thing is, she breaks up with her boyfriend and she jumps into this new relationship, and then she has like this moment where she's like, I need to focus on myself, I need to make sure that I'm me before I'm with another man. And I just loved that for her. Like, I loved her self-awareness and her personal growth. Dean, however, needs to get a grip. Instantly he's this playboy that doesn't want to settle down, and he's just so full of himself, and I just hated him. And he had this weird hatred for this woman Sabrina, who is our protagonist in the 4th book. He hated her with a passion for no reason, and like, you find out she hated him back, and it's fine, whatever. They were both childish together, but he will not let this go, and he won't even let it go in the 4th book, and I just hated him. So the 4th book made me hate him even more, and it's not even about him. He was just obnoxious and irritable. I just really didn't like him. I think I only really like 2 of the guys from this series because they're all a bit full of themselves. But he was just intolerable, and I really, really hated him. However, I did enjoy the romance overall. I really enjoy the setting of these stories. That's what it is. The like campus setting, and the way that in romance series we often see interlinking characters, but in this one they're so interlinked because they live together, the guys, that you see them all the time, and it feels so good. Like, it's exactly what I want, and I want another series like that. And Elle Kennedy is not the best writer. I also have problems with problematic elements in this series. Every book seems to have a new problematic element for me to point out, and for this one, it was heavy slut-shaming. There was quite a lot of it in all the books, however, this one in particular was so heavy, and it put me off the book a lot. And then the 4th book was The Goal. So as I said, I finished off the series. This one followed Sabrina, who Dean hated in the last book, and Tucker. Now, the one thing I really loved about this book is we followed these playboys that don't want to settle down through the whole series, whereas Tucker, whilst being a bit of a playboy, all he wants in life is to settle down, have a wife, have kids, have a family, and I just loved him. Like, he was so different from the other guys, and I just really liked that he was so mature and so willing to do what he has to do. So I really, really liked him. Whereas Sabrina is like intolerable, but I liked her. Like, she was like meant to be this hard, stone cold woman. She's only focused on her career. She doesn't want men. She doesn't want you. You provide one thing, and she doesn't want anything else out of you. I really, really liked her. I loved seeing her, like, because it was a facade. I liked seeing her facade ease away slowly throughout the book. She was just a very interesting character. I didn't love the plot point, I will admit. It wasn't great. But what I did love about this series is the third book and the fourth book overlap, like the events overlap. So you see some things in the third book that you don't see until halfway through the fourth book. And I really, really enjoyed that, but it did mean that sometimes I was waiting for the things to happen because two different big events happen, and it was kind of hard to see them twice because one of them was a very hard thing to read. But it was very fun overall, very interesting, very good. However, as I said, there's a problematic element in every one of the books, and in this one I would say there's a bit of lesbophobia in it. Lesbophobia? Yeah, lesbophobia. And I just really, well, obviously did not like that. I don't know why anyone would. So yeah, the problem is with the series is it is always something problematic in it. So if you choose to go into it, be aware. Next I read Belladonna by Adeline Grace. And this book is all vibes, barely any plot, and that's fine. We follow a girl who has, since birth, been able to, like, summon death. And then she finds out she can do some things, and we follow her as she goes to this new place, and it's like this very rundown, haunted estate. And I was reading this one while on holiday in a very big ivy-covered house. So it felt very similar, like it was the right time to read the book because the vibes matched, which definitely helped my reading experience and made me a bit more generous in my rating. I did give it 3 stars, but as I've listed in my Goodreads review, it's a generous 3 stars because I did almost DNF the book at 68% of the way through because I was bored out of my mind. However, I'm glad I stuck with it. The ending was worth it, and now I'm tempted to read the next book when it comes out. So I feel like it couldn't have been all that bad. What I do find interesting in this book is death as a character, and I really like when that happens. I feel like death is just such an interesting thing to play with as a character in books, and I think not enough people do it. There is like a cliffhanger ending to the book, but more in a way that it introduces the second book, because the mystery within the first book, because it's a murder mystery, is well wrapped up, and I really like that. I really like the ghosts, I really like the hauntings. The vibes are definitely there for this book, and I enjoyed that. I think it was more the writing for me got a little bit slow. I think the book was a little bit long, could have done with being shaved off a bit. However, since it came out, because I got an ARC, a lot of people have loved this book, so I feel like, you know, if it sounds like your cup of tea, you'll probably like it. And I'm definitely intrigued by the next book. I just think they set a lot of groundwork. I didn't love that per se. Next book was a reread, and I read My Dad's Best Friend by Katie Robert. I just fancied reading something easy the day I came back from holiday. It was boiling in the UK, and I was just lying on the floor in here because it's the coolest room in the house. Just like, I can't do this anymore. Just lying on the floor for like 8 hours, just reading. So I enjoyed it. I give this one 4 stars in the series. I really enjoyed this series. I think it's just fun. Nothing much to say. It's no plot, pure smut. Fun. Next, another very disappointing read. I had quite a few of them after my 5-star. And this was Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. Unfortunately, this book was such a letdown. I was desperate to read this book. However, I'm going to accept that I do not like carnivals, magic shows. I'm going to accept it. I'm not going to read anymore because I don't. This book was boring with a capital B. The first 20% I flew through. I read it all in like one morning with my cup of coffee on holiday. So it was really nice. I was having a great time. Then from that point on, I was having to convince myself not to DNF every 5%. Every 5% I turned off my Kindle. I went, no, I'm done. I'm just going to move on. It took me 5 days to read this book, which when you're trying to read a book a day, not good. 5 whole days. It was boring. It was bland. The characters are insufferable. I absolutely despised the main character. Don't care for the love interest. Felt nothing towards him. It was awful. However, I am somebody who did not like Caraval, and this book was Caraval. It was the exact same book. So if you were a fan of Caraval, this book is for you. You'll probably really enjoy it. For me, definitely not. Will not be reading another one again because I can't put this on myself. I can't keep doing it. I can't. I love that in my Goodreads review I wrote, I simply found the main character to be an incessant whiner and somebody who couldn't make a decision by herself for the life of her or for anyone else for that matter. Because yes, people's lives were on the line and she couldn't make a simple decision. I hated her. So next I read my 3rd Colleen Hoover book, Ugly Love. And it made me realise how wrong I was to start with Verity, because Verity was so not good compared to every other book she's written that I've read so far. I've read 2 other ones. So, but Verity was bleh and whatever. And since then, I've just been so impressed by Colleen Hoover's works. Like, I feel like, yes, there's so many problematic elements that you're just sat there like, why would you write that? And they're toxic and they're not great written. However, I am like a sucker for these books. They are like my drugs. And I'm so excited to read every single book she's written, to be honest, and see which ones I love. This got a 4-star. And the only reason it did not get a 5-star was because it was not as toxic as people were saying. The whole of the internet was saying that this was a toxic romance. And it wasn't. What had happened was Miles has gone through something that you find out later on in the book. He's gone through something quite traumatic. And so because of that, he doesn't want a relationship ever again. He doesn't deserve love. He doesn't want it. That's not toxic. He was quite upfront to our protagonist, whose name I can't remember, the whole time. He never once led her on. He said, I will not love you. I will never love you. This is just a fling if you want it. I'm sorry that she couldn't understand that and kept imagining things in her head that he kept saying she couldn't have. He never once misled her. I'm sorry, no. It was not toxic. She was upset. However, they handled things very well. There was nothing toxic about it. I'm sorry. There was nothing toxic about the last relationship, because you see 2 timelines. And Miles is someone who met this girl, fell in love with this girl, and then their parents got married, so they became step-siblings. However, they did not grow up together. They had already met. They were already in love. There was nothing toxic about that. I mean, nothing toxic in this book, really. Okay, so I don't get it. I mean, maybe there's some issues there that if like someone had done that to me, I'd be like, you're a bit of an ass. But it certainly wasn't a toxic romance, and TikTok had made me believe that it was going to be, so I was expecting like it ends with us, and I wasn't getting it. So it's not Colleen Hoover's fault, it's TikTok's fault that I did not give this a 5-star. And I usually don't really like dual timelines because I usually find one more entertaining than the other. However, I thought both timelines were really fun, really fresh. It kept things going and moving at a good pace. I really enjoyed both. I wasn't bored. However, there are some lines that Colleen Hoover writes that have me rolling on the floor. I'm like, what are you doing? What made you think this was okay? Like, there's one picture that goes around Twitter that was in this book, and I was just like, why is this in the book? Why would you write this? Especially with what follows next. And you're like, that really wasn't the place for that sentence, Miss Girl. So yes, she's a bit of a weird writer, bit of an awkward one to read. However, they're so quick and easy to consume. I've read all of her books in one sitting and I just really enjoy them. So yeah, fun, definitely fun. Next we have I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I think we've all read this month. I was a massive fan growing up of iCarly, and I think most of us of my age were. And so it was really sad to read this book, because now I will never be able to rewatch it. I didn't watch the reboot anyway, but now I never could. It's so ruined it all for me. And I mean, I'm glad it did, because like I feel like we need to know these things that were happening to children actors. But I definitely couldn't watch it anymore, and sometimes clips come up on my TikTok and I just can't watch them. I'm just like, no, it makes me too sad. It's fueled my dislike for Ariana Grande as well, so that was great. I felt so sorry for her. This is such a sad memoir. She has had such a hard life, and I feel nothing but sympathy for her. This memoir hid nothing. It was so out and open, and there were sometimes I was thinking, I wouldn't put that in my book. I wouldn't want the world to know that, and she wanted us to know, and I was just so like, when I say I enjoyed reading it, it sounds really weird, because when the content that's in it, you can't really enjoy reading. However, this was a 5-star memoir. It was just something else, and yeah, I feel a lot of sympathy for Jeanette McCurdy, and I definitely recommend you read this book. No wonder it is taking the world by storm and blowing up, because it deserves it. Next, I read Soul of the Sword by Julia Kagawa. This is the second book in the Shadow of the Fox series. I absolutely adored the first book. I gave it a 4.5 stars. This one was a bit of a disappointment, I won't lie to you. I gave it a 3, being generous. Just nothing happens in this book. I feel like it was a bit of a letdown. I'm sitting there enjoying my read, you know, of Shadow the Fox. All of it goes to hell, and then we have to endure a whole book where everything is hell and nothing really gets resolved in this hell. And now you want me to read a third book trying to resolve hell? No. So as much as I love the first one, I have decided not to continue because I feel like it just wasn't needed to have a second book. That book did nothing for me, so I have nothing more to say other than, yeah, it was a bit bland. I mean, I gave it 3 stars because I still like the characters. However, there's some deaths that if had happened in the first book, I would have sobbed. I didn't even like raise an eyebrow. I was listening on my audiobook and I literally didn't care. I was like, oh, he died. Sad. That shouldn't happen when you're as invested into the characters as I was in the first book. And it's not like I'd waited a long time to read the second one. It was the next month I read it. So yeah, this was not the book for me, unfortunately. Next, I read The Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. This was what I expected to be a thriller and was not. I expected this to be a thriller. I went in thinking it was a thriller. I'm not sure why. I suppose it's because the cover, it feels like a thriller. It's not really. It's got some suspenseful moments, but I'd say it's more like suspense literary, to be honest. It was very good though. I gave it a 4 stars. I was really invested. We follow this man, Cooper, I think his name is. We follow Cooper and he lives with his daughter out in a cabin in the middle of the woods in isolation, completely in isolation, and their friend Jake comes once a year to deliver packages for them to survive, you know? And one year Jake doesn't come, so it's all a bit like, that makes it sound thrillery. That's like the synopsis, but it's not really. It's not really about that. It's more about just showing family love and the like lengths you'd go to protect your family and be with your family. It's a very, very sad book, but also a very hopeful one. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the ending. I couldn't see how it was all going to be resolved, and then it was, and I was like, okay, great. It was bittersweet. I just really liked it, but it was not what I expected, and I kind of would love for it to have been a horror thriller, but it wasn't. But that's okay. That's fine. It was still a good book. Next, I read a bit of a disappointment, and that was Hide by Kirsten White. I gave it a 3, but I've given it a low 3. It is a horror. It's not a thriller. It's a horror set in like a theme park, and everybody has to hide, and the person who's not found wins money. And we follow this woman who survived her family's massacre as a child by hiding, so she feels like she could hide and win all this money. So we follow her. The first half of the book, very entertaining. 50% in, I was entertained, I was intrigued, I was ready to go. The second half of the book, what happened? I feel like we lost our way. I feel like the author was not on my wavelength, that's for sure, and I wasn't on hers. I was far away from it, actually. What was happening? I'm not sure. I wasn't aware that it was a supernatural horror, so that was kind of disappointing. I just didn't want that at the time. It's not what I wanted, it's not what I expected. It wasn't scary anymore, which is sad, because I'd had a lot of tension built up for me in the first half. So it was kind of just like, it gave me blue balls, to be honest. I was just disappointed. And yeah, I guess we'll just move on from that one because I have nothing more to say other than it's sad, and if somebody could please write a good horror set in a theme park, I will buy it. Thank you. And if anyone has any recommendations of something like that, I will buy it. Please leave it down below. The next book I read was Waking the Witch by Rachel Burge. And again, this is one of those situations where I loved the first half. We follow Ivy, who doesn't know her mother, and she gets a letter and she knows where her mother lives now. She lives on this island in Wales. And Ivy decides to go there, and she goes there with Tom, who's like a guy she doesn't really like from work, but then it's not hate or anything. So they go, and Tom goes with her, and I really like Tom as a side character. I think he was a very interesting one. I think he was real. I think Ivy was quite real too. She was just a bit of a weirdo, and I like that about her. I think they had a lot of genuine reasons for doing things. It didn't feel stupid or anything. Like, you know, sometimes you think, oh, why would they end up there? I didn't feel like that with this. It didn't feel trivial at all. The second half, I wasn't entertained. I was bored. I think it lost its way again. I feel like it became a very strange, weird book, and I was like, what the hell is going on? There's birds. I don't get it. However, the creepiness never left. The creepiness was there from beginning to end. The island has like no electricity on it. Nobody is living there because it's the middle of the winter and nobody stays there in the winter. So it's just Ivy's mum, and it is just so spooky and scary, and I love that. And I literally had candles lit everywhere because I was like, I'm scared. I just feel that the plot got a bit away from us. I feel like it went from being creepy and spooky to being, what is going on? What is happening? It was awfully paced by the end, so terribly paced. In a matter of 20 pages, we were presented with the conflict, the preparation for the conflict and the resolution in 20 pages. And the ending was so unsatisfying. I'm assuming there's a second book. I don't know. If there's not, it's even worse. I will not be reading a second book. But it was the most unsatisfying ending known to man. It was just not it. Not it at all. But I really enjoyed the first half, and I really enjoyed that it had Welsh mythology in it. Like, I really, really loved that it had like Merlin and everything. It was a really, really cool concept. The execution just wasn't there for me in that second half. Next, I read another Taylor Jenkins Reid book, and I read Carrie Soto is Back, and wow. I know we're all loving it, aren't we? Everybody is obsessed with this book right now, and for good right reasons too. So Carrie is a record-breaking tennis player who is in retirement, and we start the book watching her watch a tennis game, and her record is going to be beaten, and she's like, nah, back in the game. I'm going. Nobody's taking my record from me. And we literally just watch Carrie in tennis games. The entire book is just Carrie tennising over and over again, practicing tennis, going to tennis matches, finishing the tennis match and watching what happened to understand where she either went wrong or what she did right. Back to practice, back to tennis game. It sounds boring, and in concept it is boring, but it was not. It was amazing. Carrie is the most realistic character ever. Like, as I said to you earlier, Taylor Jenkins Reid has this ability to write such well-constructed characters that you feel are so real. Carrie Soto is the exact same. The fact that this is not a memoir written by Carrie Soto, the real-life tennis player, is insane to me. How does Carrie not exist? How? I cannot grasp this concept. She's so well-written, she's so realistic, that I was literally forgetting that she wasn't real. Carrie, I absolutely adored as well as a character. She's so complex. She has her moments of like, what are you doing? And other moments of just, yeah, I understand your motivations, your frustrations, I get it. And I just felt so upset by the end of the book to be done with her story. Like, I was so distraught. There's just very rare times that I feel like that. It's very rare that I'll connect to the character enough to be upset when they're gone. And that was the case with Carrie. Like, I was literally closing the book, I was listening to the audio, but like I finished the book and I was like, oh no, not happening. So I was so upset. I gave it a 4 stars overall because I feel like, as much as it was a great book, it is just tennis over and over and over again. But the fact that TJR has the ability to make me enjoy a book that is just tennis over and over again, as someone who's not even a tennis fan, is incredible. How does she manage that? Like, in theory, if I explain the book plot to you, it is just tennis. Nothing happens. And yet, as everyone is telling you, it is so entertaining. It is so good. It is so well done. And I absolutely loved it. At the end, like, well, I say at the end, like the last 25% was a little bit sad, and I felt so connected to the sadness, and it was all just so good. This book. I feel like it definitely should have been a 5-star for me. It was just the fact that I couldn't really well explain what I loved about it that maybe give it a 4, but maybe it's like a 4.5. I would definitely recommend the audio book if you're going to read this, because it's like full narration and there's like news articles and news broadcasts, and you can hear that in the audiobook, so I definitely recommend it. It was very, very good. Next, I read The Society for Soulless Girls by Laura Stephen. And I picked this up hoping it would be like Truly Devious, and it was. It was quite literally a copy of Truly Devious, and I loved it. So good in that regard. However, I gave it 2 stars because The characters were insufferable. They were awful. They were some of the most hated characters I've ever read about. I could not get on board with them. I wanted them to die. And therefore, not easy to read about when you're hoping they won't die. And when you're like, you know, when they're doing things that like are dangerous and you're like, oh my god, like I am about Trudy Devious. Didn't feel that way in this book. Instead, I was like, oh god, drop to your death or just be murdered. I just did not care. The storyline is fun, it's unique, and it's definitely a great one. However, it's such a character-driven story that if you don't like the characters, it's not really going to work for you. And it did not work for me. I did not like them. It is a shame, but it is what it is. So, 2 stars. Next, I read The AntiRelationship Year by Katie Wismer. I gave it a 4, it's more like a 3.5. It's just a romance about this girl who's in college meets a guy who's in a band. He turns out to be a bit of an ass, and she ends up falling in love with her best friend. It's very simple. It's college friends to lovers romance. Entertaining, fun. I don't really have any thoughts, to be honest. I feel like sometimes the writing was a bit like, ugh. And there was one character who was like a friend who I absolutely despised. I mean, it ended fine. Like, I'm not holding that against the book. It's just I was so struggling to read anything about her because I was like, oh my god, I hate you. Next, I read Heartbones by Colleen Hoover, and I gave it a 4 stars. This book follows a girl whose name I can't remember, typical, and her mum dies. She's a drug addict and she dies. So she rings her dad and she says, can I come stay with you? Doesn't tell him that her mum's died, just goes there. Doesn't have a lot of like a relationship with her dad, and her dad's married this woman who's very rich and lives in a beach house. So our protagonist goes to this beach house. And like to go from somewhere where she can barely eat because her mum's buying drugs to this beach house is quite the transition, and she's really struggling with it. And she meets this man who kind of is a bit of a mystery to her. He lives local and stuff. And I'm torn on this book. I have not stopped thinking about this book since I read it. Like, I really loved it. However, what I loved most about it was the beach setting. Like, if you have any recommendations for beach set books that, like, you live on the beach, it talks about the beach all the time, that friends camp on the beach and stuff, I want it. I want that recommendation, please. I was a bit, like, thing about the plot point. Like, there's always a thing in Colleen Hoover's books, like a twist, like a sad twist. Or, like, a bad twist, you know, like a toxic twist. And this book, I just didn't love the thing that happened. I was like, okay. So yeah, I don't really know what to say about it because I don't want to spoil anything. It was good. It was a very entertaining book. I really loved the setting mostly. That's mostly what I loved about this book, and why I can't stop thinking about it is I love the set. I feel like our characters lacked a lot of growth. I feel like we lacked a lot of depth and explanation. So even though I loved it, there are definitely problems in this book. It is not one of her better ones, but it's not Verity, so that's good. Then I read House of Furies by Madeleine Roux. This is my second book from this author, and I didn't like it again. This is a horror about a girl who goes to work at a manor house, and when she gets there, she finds things are very sinister. The vibes were good, but the plot was not. I did not really care about anything. I don't know, this author doesn't grip me. Her writing style doesn't pull me in. It doesn't attract me into a story. And with a plot that's as good as that plot, like the concept was so good, so like solid 10 out of 10, why was I not feeling it? Twice in both of her books. It's just her writing style and me don't gel very well. So I gave it 2 stars. Not much to say. I feel like if you gel with her writing style, you would enjoy the plot because it is a good concept. But if you struggle like me to vibe with her writing style, it isn't going to work for you. Then I read Happily Ever After by Kira Cass. This is like a bind-up of all the novellas from the Selection series. I adored the first 3 books in the Selection series, following America and Maxon. Oh, perfect. Loved them. Didn't love the second 2 books, the last 2 books, got rid of them. However, the bind-up of novellas was good. I feel like it was like a 3.5 all the way through. Like, I really enjoyed seeing more backstory to the Queen, but I feel like some of the stories were a little bit repetitive to what we'd seen in the story. Like, we got POVs of some people that I didn't feel we need the POVs for, you know? I feel like we got enough of the story in the original book. Plus, the last story, I know now from my friend Robbie that it was like a way to get people to read The Siren by Kira Cass. I did not know that book existed. So when a random short story about mermaids started happening in a book where I've never seen, in like a book series where I'd never seen mermaids before, I was so confused, and it like ruined it all for me. Like I ended the book on a bad note, so it put it down to a 3 instead of a 3.5. But but that was like, you know, that was being pedantic, but I didn't know. So in case you want to read this book and you're very confused by the last story, apparently it's just a gateway into the Siren book. I would love to have known that when I was listening to it, because the confusion was real. So yeah, overall it was fine. Definitely not essential reading to the selection series. And I would say, like, if you're a big fan, read it. But I was a big fan of the selection series, like 5-star reads. And I didn't feel this was necessary anyway. And I also didn't feel like, oh yeah, good, next new content in this world. I didn't feel that way about it either. So not sure. I mean, I wouldn't say don't pick it up. It's definitely got beautiful illustrations and things. And again, I really enjoyed the Queen stories, but I feel nothing more about it. So it's up to you. If you're looking for something to read and you've read the selection series and loved it, go for it. But if you haven't, or you think the selection was okay, don't bother reading the extra content. It's not like it's going to give you anything new. Next, I read the STEMinist collection by Ali Hazelwood. The first book was so good. It was under one roof, and we follow two characters who absolutely hate each other from the offset, but they have to live together. Forced proximity. And I just love the slow progression of hatred to suddenly just kind of like acceptance of each other, and then they're just sat there kind of like, do you want some Chinese and watch a movie? And then these like, okay. And I just love that slow acceptance. Like I felt the pining. I felt like that slow burn. I just had a really good time with that audio. I listened to it on audio. I had a really good time with that audiobook. I just was like, yeah, absolutely. Is it The Love Hypothesis rewritten? Yes, all of them are. However, I had something new from this one with the forced proximity of in one house. I had such a good time with it. Yeah, it was just really fun. I gave this one 5 stars. The second one, Stuck With You, is like a second chance romance. They dated, they hate, then he did something and she hated him for it, and then they get stuck in an elevator one day and it all comes back. Like they're reminiscing, and then they're like, this is why I hate you, and he's like, and then yeah. 4 stars, are very, very entertaining. It is under one roof, rewritten, just set in an elevator. It is the same book. And they're all the three of them are all friends. So they're all FaceTiming each other, talking about it. And it's like having the same FaceTimes over and over again. Like it is very repetitive, which is why my ratings decrease as you go through the series. I definitely enjoyed this. I definitely thought it was fun. Not as good as the first one. Then we have Below Zero, which is the last one. And again, okay, yes, it involves snow, but it is just the same book again. And I read them all in one day, and I was like, I'm done now. Don't read them all in one day, because you will get bored of the repetitiveness. I gave this one 3. It went 5, 4, 3 because I'd read the same books over and over again. What did I expect? The characters in this one I just didn't vibe with either. I didn't like her, I didn't like him. So it didn't quite work for me. But again, it was a fun, quick romance, so I couldn't like be too harsh on it. Next, I read the Kiss Quotient. I read the entire series. So let's start with the Kiss Quotient. I enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the concept. I love the autistic rep. I'm not autistic, so I can't speak on it. However, I read a lot of reviews and seen a lot of booktube reviews, people saying it's good rep, so there we go. I had a good time with it. However, our male protagonist is a sex worker, and she goes to him for help because she thinks she's bad at sex. So she wants to be good at sex to attract a man. And that's all well and good. And you know what? He doesn't want to be in sex work, and that is fine. He doesn't have to want to be in sex work. That is fine. However, the way sex work is portrayed and sex workers are portrayed is like it's evil, and I just did not like that. I really found it quite offensive. I mean, not, you know, I'm not a sex worker, so again, I cannot speak on behalf of them, but from my point of view, it seemed offensive, and I wouldn't want to read that as a sex worker. I would much rather read a book like The Roommate by Rosie Dannon, where it's uplifting of sex work, instead of thinking of it as like a taboo topic by the Kiss Quotient. So yeah, really was not pleased by that book. The romance was good and I was like rooting for the romance. It's definitely got good representations of different things in the books, not just, just autistic rep. So that was fun. But yeah, it rubbed me up the wrong way. Then I read The Bride Test, and again, I didn't love it. It was definitely a low 3. It wasn't quite a 2, but it wasn't quite a high 3 either. Maybe like a 2.5. It's a bit weird. The mum sets up her autistic son with a woman from another country. Okay, like it's a bit weird and a bit wrong, but okay. Who am I to judge? It's a story. So I was like, okay, I can get on board, but the characters were just like, what is happening? Like, she is horrible. Like, you're in her head a lot of the time, and she doesn't quite grasp what she's doing, and I just don't feel like it's right. And the fact that she could just like abandon her daughter again rubs me up the wrong way. Like, it just does not feel good to me, and I just couldn't root for her, and then couldn't root for him with her. Yeah, rubbed me up the wrong way. And then I read The Heart Principle. This was the worst one of the bunch. I went full on 2 stars for this. What was going on? So in this one, we are in the head of an autistic person, just as we have been for the last 2 books, which means that a lot of things are different to a normal romance you would read. Love that. However, that doesn't quite give you an excuse for cheating. There's actually cheating in this book, and it doesn't justify it. So I don't know. I read a couple of Own Voices reviews on this book as well, and they did say similar things, so I feel like it's kind of a unanimous thought process on this book. Didn't love it. I don't agree with cheating, no matter what the excuse is. I don't think it's right, and I didn't enjoy this book as a result of it. Cheating shouldn't be in a romance, in my opinion, because it's not really excusable. So, didn't like it at all. Next, I read Say Yes by Elle Kennedy. This was just a very quick, steamy story. There is no little plot to this. They are at a wedding. She sleeps with someone, and yeah, that's it. There's not much to speak on it. It was fun. I gave it a 3 stars. It was typical Elle Kennedy writing, so not top notch, but definitely fun, entertaining, had a good time. And if you have an Audible subscription, it's included as free in your Audible subscription, so you can read it. Next, I read After Dark by Jane Carrie, and this was something that I was expecting to be a thriller, and it's not. It's more of a dystopian mystery, so be prepared. This is, wow. I haven't stopped thinking about this book since I read it, and it's been like a week, so it was definitely good. It follows a world where men are curfewed. They cannot come out after 7 p.m. or something like that. They are tagged. They can be tracked. It is so interesting, and it's very pro-women, this book. Like, it's going to wind a lot of men up. It does lots of discussion on the not all men debate that we always see on social media, and it talks about like the fact that even in a world where men are, well, I don't know, imprisoned, they physically shouldn't be able to cause harm. They can still cause harm. It's like a murder mystery and a bit of a thrillery story, but like, it's just so interesting. The thing is, we follow one person. The reason I didn't love this book, we follow a girl called Cassie, and she's pretty much lived her entire life in the system where her father cannot come outside, and he has been put into prison for breaking curfew. So she hates curfew. She doesn't understand. She's never lived in a world where men hurt her because she's never had to. Whereas her mother has, and her mother is trying to explain to her that men are dangerous, and just because she doesn't see it now doesn't mean it didn't happen. You basically follow Cassie, who you absolutely hate. She's a 17-year-old girl, and she's awful. But you see her discovering on her own the truth about men. And obviously, just in case there are any lovely men watching who are these types of men, yes, it talks about not all men. It talks about the fact that there's good men, and those good men are being punished for the deeds of bad men. However, it may not be all men, but it is enough men to cause alarm. You know, it is enough men who hurt women to need this system. And it talked about the crumbling of the system and how when that crumbles, look what happens, and the attacks on women start again. It's kind of like a mixture of timelines. I'm not really sure how many, I think 2, but it was so like jumpy and different points of view and different characters. It was a bit of a mess, but in a way that I enjoyed. I accepted the mess and I enjoyed embracing it as well. Definitely fun in that regards, definitely kept it entertaining, definitely kept the like mystery up because I was always a bit like confused and unsettled. I did feel the murder was a little bit boring and predictable, but I also feel like even though you'd think the murder is the main point of the book, it's not. It's more about discussions of women and men. So I feel like I didn't mind the fact that it was predictable and boring. So that was fine. I think this would be a perfect read for all women, but also for some men who are open to these discussions, to see things from a woman's point of view. And it can be like a bit of like, sometimes it's really harsh, and I was like, oh, a bit far. And it was definitely like, to me, unrealistic at the beginning, because I was like, well, we're not gonna curfew all men, but you could see how they'd gotten to this stage in this world to have done this. You could see it and you could understand it, and it felt realistic at this point. I was like, whoa, like this book was just so well written, so well done. I gave it a 3, but I'm bumping that up to a 3.5 because it definitely deserved it. And I thought about it a lot. I just didn't get a 4-star feeling from it. I would definitely still recommend this book, however. And I would definitely be interested in reading more from this author in the future. Next, I read Little Bird by Tiffany Murray. What was this book? I'm not really sure I understand what it was trying to do or what happened. So our protagonist has gone through a divorce and she's now living on her own. She's an alcoholic, she's depressed, she's going through it. You know, she is not living her best life. And one day, next door neighbour moves in called Sue, who I adore. I love Sue. And she's like, get away from me. Why is this woman annoying me? Why is this woman here? Bye. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy. Have a good sleep. You're so cute. And then suddenly this skeleton appears in her garden. And this skeleton starts wrapping vines everywhere until she tells him a story. I mean, I read it and I understood what was being said, but I don't think I understood what was happening, because by the end I was like, what just happened? It's like, the ending is like, was that really a good choice? I'm not really sure I understand the symbolism for it. I think there was definitely some sort of symbolism because I don't really get it. But I'm not sure I understand what the symbolism was. I wasn't clever enough to understand. So sad. So yeah, I gave it a 2-star. It was good. For someone who could understand it, I'm sure, but I could not. So I'll just move on swiftly. The last book I read in August was The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams, and thankfully it was a good one. I had a good time. I gave it a 4 stars. It is a romance between a famous celebrity and his best friend. They were best friends in school or something, and then one of them went to university and they kind of just didn't really speak anymore, and then they came back and they became best friends again, and you're like years into their relationship again. And no girl compares to him, and he's in love with her, secretly pining. She's secretly pining. It's all going on. However, it was definitely a fun romance. I had a good time. I was rooting for them. What's our main character's name? What's her name? I think her name's like Brie or B or something. I can't remember. She was great. She was really lovely. She was like one of the nicest characters I've ever read about. Like, I really loved her. However, I've seen a review since where someone hated this book, gave it a 1 star and called her a pick-me girl, and she's not like other girls, she's better than other girls, and I can definitely see their point. I think it just depends on how you interpret her as you're reading. So I think she's like Marmite, you know, you either love her or you hate her. I happen to love her. And then the person who reviewed it also said that the guy was 2D and boring, and his only personality was sports and loving her. And it ruined him for me because it's so true. And I just didn't see it at the time. And then I was like, you're not wrong. So it kind of ruined it for me. But I did give it a 4 star overall. I did find it fun. I did find it very entertaining. It is Fade to Black. So Didn't love that because I don't really like adult romances that fade to black because it just gives it a YA feel. Author's choice, and the author talked about the fact that she feels like there's not enough fade to black in the world, and in the author's note she was talking about like everything feels a little bit like steamy now and she doesn't like it. I mean, I like it, so didn't quite work for me in that way, but I gave it a 4-star. I thought it was a fun romance, a good time. If you like sports romances or best friends to lovers, you'll love this book, I'm sure, but not if you don't like fade to black, which I'm not a big fan of, to be honest. So those are the 31 books I read in August. My god, that was a lot to talk about. I feel like I've just entered a comatose state. My goodness me. I hope I can get this under an hour, this video, because that's going to take a lot of editing, but I'm going to try my best. Because I don't think anyone wants to sit there for this long. If you are here by the end, honestly, props to you. Leave me the most random emoji you can find down below. And thank you, honestly, for making it this far. Have you read any of these books? Do you disagree or agree with anything I said? Do you fancy picking up any of these books now that I have told you about them? And yeah, thank you so much for watching this crazy long video, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye.